So I have to use this to push it forward, is that it?
Yeah, you can use that too.
Oh, I can
No,
use...
no, this one, because this is...
No, it's-
No, this one.
It's all right. I will do it.
Okay.
Okay. I've spent the last year and a half, 2 years, trying to figure out the logic of honor killings. It is a most unpleasant topic. You will hear very little humor today. Nothing really to laugh about, and that's unlike my usual talks, where I try to at least leaven the seriousness with a little humor. But this ain't no laughing matter. Indeed, this is a kind of phenomenon that appears to challenge the adequacy of evolutionary logic right at its core. Why, in Jesus' name, are you murdering your grown daughter, whom you've invested, let us say, 17 years of work in, and maybe even have some feelings toward her of love and anticipated reward and so on? Why are you killing her? And often in especially cruel public ways. Where the hell is the benefit in that? Especially within evolutionary logic, where we presume that natural selection is always favoring you maximizing the number of your surviving offspring, or put slightly more precisely, your surviving genes as found primarily in your offspring, but also in collateral relatives. Your brothers and sisters that are full siblings are just as related to you, or you're just as related to them as you are to your own children. So you can be selected to add brothers and sisters to the world, even if it subtracts children, as long as the net result is positive. So coming up with the evolutionary genetics of honor killing is not a trivial problem, nor do you want to get it wrong. There are two primary religions that it is associated with, Muslim and Hindu, and each with a slightly different logic, but both of them involve inbreeding and the consequences of repeated inbreeding. We're going to start with the Muslim case, whose logic I think is more obvious, and the facts supporting it are stronger. So let's start with a Pakistani honor killing. In this case, 19-year-old Pakistani woman falls in love against her family's wishes and ran off to marry her boyfriend. This is a common source of an honor killing, when the girl does not obey the parental or family assignment of her mate. And in the case of the Muslims, this is often a first cousin. 70% of marriages in Saudi Arabia are between first cousins. 40% of marriages in Iraq are between first cousins. Somewhere around that number in Pakistan are between first cousins. So the logic to explain these honor killings has to do with what the effects of repeated first cousins are on degrees of relatedness in the family, and therefore how you value certain individuals in certain situations. So in any case, this 19-year-old Pakistani woman falls in love against her family's wishes and runs off to marry her boyfriend. We've known for 40 or 50 years that there were societies where there was pressure for individuals to marry their cousins, but the pressure was coming from the ascendant generation, from the parental generation, and it was often the case, or at least sometimes the case, that the children had no interest in pairing up with their first cousin. They would prefer outbreeding, which is intrinsically healthier, and also might just happen to fit who they fell for, who they got involved with. Whereas in the first cousin one, they may not even have choice. It may be assigned to them. All right. Hours after the marriage, her father and uncle, that's not accidental, that is a father and an uncle, visited her and sweet-talked her into their car and took her to a spot along a riverbank. To sweet-talk her, they said her mother was missing her. They also brought a little piece of cake that her brother had made specially for her. Sweet piece of cake. They promised her that they would bring her back after visiting Mom for a couple of hours, but they had no intention of bringing her back at all. They took her to a river and proceeded to attempt to murder her. The uncle grabs her by the neck and starts to strangle her, and she passes out. The father fires a shot from a gun at her head, but she either jerks at the last minute or he does, and the bullet doesn't really go in deep. It goes kind of sideways, takes off part of her front face, and you know, the neocortex here, you can stick a bullet all the way through it, and maybe your only problem is that you can't find your shoes at all, or whatever. It's back here where a bullet will kill you dead. In any case, she's passed out, she's been shot, they presume she's dead. So they put her in a burlap bag, and they fling the burlap bag into the river, and they drive off. Well, the cold water of the river revives her because she's not in fact dead. And she manages to free herself from the burlap bag and to swim ashore. She then clambers up to the road, and some passing motorist takes her to a gas station, and she calls and gets some help from there. The police take her, they actually guard her to keep her father from coming back and finishing off the job in the hospital. Eventually, they work out some deal with the daughter where she ends up forgiving them, which is a common feature of the resolution of some of these things. But the key thing is that it is her father and her uncle. It is her father and her uncle that are trying to murder her. Now, by the way, most first cousin marriages in our species are what are called cross cousin marriages. That's your father's sister's child, or it's your mother's brother's child. So in the ascendant generation, the two sexes are different. Parallel cousin, it is your mother's sister's child or your father's brother. There's only one society in the world where it's mother's sister, and I even doubt that one. All the rest are father's brother, and they originate in the time of Muhammad and in the Arab world, especially Medina and so on, i.e. Saudi Arabia, which has, as I mentioned, the highest rate of cousin marriages, and they're all parallel cousin. That's especially dangerous to women because that means your father and his brother have a self-interest in common. So you have two male lineages that are linked together by cousin marriages and who will then act together. Indeed, it's easily enough to show that you might expect the uncle to take the lead because he's less related to the girl that's being murdered, but suffers the same negative side effects as does the father. All right, fine. That's one honor killing. Now,
This happened where?
Beg your pardon? That was in Pakistan. Right. Um, and it's not necessarily the case that it's in Pakistan if it's Pakistanis. Muslim honor killings go wherever the Muslims go. Hindus do not, for reasons I'll come back to. Okay? So you've got, for example, Muslim honor killings in the U.S. I'll show you a couple very shortly. Now, honor killings in the U.S., by the way, often involve expressing personal independence. Acting too American is the predominant verbal reason given for killing off one of your children. It's not always a female, but it usually is. The only case in the U.S. that I know of where it's a male is a 38-year-old homosexual male, again Pakistani. Father's been trying to make him give up the homosexuality and marry a cousin or whatever, but he's not doing it. So he kills him off at age 38. He murders him with a gun. Well, God Almighty, if you know anything about homosexuality, if your son has been gay for 38 years, he ain't changing tomorrow. You can forget about that. You can just let him, allow him as he is. He's not doing any more damage to you or whatnot, and you cannot get him to reproduce. The U.S. has the strongest child culture, I would say, in the world. If you go to the U.S. when you're 2 to 4 years old, it does not matter whether you're coming from Guatemala, whether you're coming from Spain, whether you're coming from Russia. By the time you're 14, all you want to do is be an American teenager. You want to dress like one, with slits in your pants. You want to dance like one. You want to boop, 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 and be an American teenager. Bollywood produces more movies than Hollywood, and to a bigger audience. There's 1 billion Indians and there's 300 million Americans. But we know that the inventiveness of the movie world still comes entirely out of California. Hollywood plus Silicon Valley is producing all these bizarre movies where people morph into God knows what kind of animals and then morph back and so forth and so on. So it has a very strong youth culture, and that creates an extra problem in that the parents who came over, they're still Pakistani or they're still Russian, but their children are American. Okay, fine. Being raped is a cause for an honor killing. Seems especially cruel. But if a woman is raped in these cultures, her reproductive value drops to 0 because she's no longer a virgin. So she cannot marry, and unless she marries a rapist. So indeed, in these cultures, sometimes a way of resolving the problem is for her to forgive the rapist and marry him. Now her reproductive value goes back up to a decent level. She's not a virgin, but still she's only having sex with one single man. And his family often has to pay a substantial dowry, if you will, a bribe, to then have them withdraw the case from court and so on. Her fate, however, is to live her life with her rapist. And when you read descriptions of what those marriages are like, they don't seem like their marriages made in heaven. If he raped her, he's often going to either prostitute her or beat her or God knows what all. In Hindu societies, they even will encourage uncle-niece marriages. They're not so much into cousin marriages. Well, uncle and niece are related by a quarter, cousins by an eighth, plus you've got a 56-year-old man and you're 17. So that must be a hell of a lot of fun. you know. Failure to breed according to parental instructions. So, I'm just going to read you some titles, and then we're going to get down to slides. Woman beheaded in Afghanistan for going out in city without her husband. Family honor kills Indian newlyweds for marrying without parental consent. In Pakistan, 5 girls were killed for having fun. Mob kills eloped lovers after storming Afghan police station. Pakistani mother sentenced to death for burning daughter alive. Los Angeles father accused of killing son because he was gay. He got 34 years in prison for the pleasure of killing off a homosexual son. Now, let me give you some examples here. These are 2 girls whose father's Pakistani. She's 18, she's 17, they're sisters, and they're acting too damn American. Happy in a car. She's even doing the teenage thing of pointing sideways as if, hey, the picture's really about my sister. Okay? Now, what's the problem? The problem is that they've got a Pakistani father who's at least half crazy. You'll see his picture in a second. He wants to take him back, the older one, to Pakistan to marry her 53-year-old cousin. She's having no part of it. Also, he dislikes both of them for acting too American. There's finally one little detail you find when you go into the thing in some depth that's disturbing, and that is they claim that he was diddling them a little bit when they were 12 and 13. Not manual rape, really, but still playing around with them. All right, let's take a look at this pleasant guy. This is the father. Now, you cannot be sure which side of his face is left and right because photographers will often reverse them. However, 90% of men are right-handed, and he is pointing with his right hand, so I do believe that this is his correct face. Now, the right brain is in the right side of the head, but it controls the left side of the face, and information from the left side goes into the right brain. So this is the more emotional center of this guy's brain. And to me, although, you know, it's easy enough to project in these pictures, he looks a little bit wickeder on that side than on that side. All right. Now, this is a strange case. This is a girl in Israel whose Christian father murders her, 3 slices to the neck with a knife, because she has a Muslim boyfriend. And in fact, she's declared that she's going to convert to being a Muslim. And he therefore goes and slits her throat to protect his honor and the honor of his family. He's, as I say, he's a Christian in Israel. This is a very strange, mixed up kind of case. Again, we don't know which side of his face is her left and her right. I happen to think that they've reversed it because that eye shows more fear. And she had fear of her father. Often these girls have fear because they have been threatened and they know that they potentially could become a victim. All right, here's another one in the United States. That was Dallas, Texas, by the way. He, by the way, shot them to death in the back of a taxi and was never caught. It's believed he may have escaped across the border into Mexico and from there to some third country, but he's on the 10 most wanted list of the FBI and has never been caught. Now, this girl, Noor al-Maliki, is murdered in Arizona, and again, it's a Pakistani who wants her to come back to Pakistan for an arranged marriage, which she's resisting. And again, she's acting too goddamn American. Now she has a boyfriend, and she leaves the home and is living there, and she's actually with the boyfriend's mother, helping the mother get food stamps. When her father comes along in a car, strikes both of them, both women, but then circles around and runs over his daughter twice. So she dies 2 weeks later. The other woman survives. Now I want you to notice one thing that's true of every woman I've shown you so far. They're good looking. She's a sweet looking girl. Same as the previous one. Same as the previous two. It's very striking to my eyes. These are not ugly girls. I've been corresponding with some people because I set up a site on the internet to discuss this, and an Indian woman writes me and says, that's counterintuitive. You'd think they'd kill off the ugly ones because the ugly ones have less value. Well, yes, but honor killings are motivated by a deeper kind of anger, and it's especially the good-looking ones that challenge the parents. Partly they may be more independent, you know. They may have more options. All right, this is just a, yeah, that's okay. There's the same girl up there on the upper left-hand corner. This is just a series of women that have been murdered. Here she's wearing conservative headdress, beautifully symmetrical face. Here she's smiling, again, wearing conservative headdress. Beautiful looking women, almost without exception. This is some kind of honor killing underway, but I don't know, it was never explained in this picture. All right. Now, here's the last one I'll describe, and this is a strange one. This woman here, Pandil Balok, became famous in Pakistan, but under a different name. She hid her identity from her family and from other people, so she had a stage name, if you will. But it was found out, and then she got scared. She went back to her family's area because she was receiving threats on the internet from men all over Pakistan, since she was someone who liked to pose in front of the camera in a sexy way or whatnot. So along comes her brother and does the honor killing. Does he look unhappy? Does he look guilty? No. Why did you kill her? She made indecent videos on Facebook and dishonored the family name of the Balak. And often, by the way, when they talk, they say, I'll cleanse the Balak family name for generations to come. And we believe, I say we as my friend David Haig at Harvard, because he's been very helpful as someone to bounce ideas against and to criticize and help me, that sometimes these things are especially appalling and atrocious precisely because you want to scare women far and wide within your kin group. And far and wide may be further down in time as well. And there are people that say it. They'll say things like, they'll know for generations to come that the Balak family is serious, and the Balaks do not put up with any disobedience. All right, to hell with that guy. Now, parallel cousin marriages. Let's just go through the genetics of it very briefly. So take ego. Ego is you, and under outbreeding, you're related to your child by 1/2, okay? But let's say you married your first cousin, and this is the first generation where you've had a first cousin marriage. Well, then you're related by 1/2, plus you're related to the cousin by 1/8, and 1/2 of his genes get passed on to the child you share with him. So it's a 1/16. So you go from 8/16 to 9/16. That's a 6% gain, forgive me, gain in degree of relatedness, which other things being equal would be a 6% gain in your genetic success. However, we know that the child of a cousin mating is at least on the order of 5% inferior in terms of phenotype. We don't know it exactly, and it would be useful to know it, but that's just a rough guesstimate. All right, now look at it from the standpoint of the father contemplating the same degree of inbreeding. Under outbreeding, he's related to his, let's say, his daughter's child by a quarter. That's his grandchild. However, he's also related through the cousin, which he's related to by a quarter, and then the cousin child he's related to by 1/8. So his degree of relatedness to the product is a quarter plus 1/8. So it goes to 3/8 from a quarter. That's a 50% gain in degree of relatedness. So he's much more apt to be in favor of this kind of inbreeding than would the individual being forced to do the inbreeding. They're barely breaking even, if indeed they're breaking even. Whereas the father, and it's the same thing for the uncle, are getting a 50% gain in relatedness, and therefore in inclusive fitness. Now, what happens if you keep that up generation after generation after generation? Nobody's done the computation. So, any youngster out there with a half year of time, waiting around that you want to fill up, kindly work out degrees of relatedness under varying assumptions regarding cousin marriages. But what I'm saying is that if you repeat them generation after generation after generation, your degree of relatedness goes up to your daughter. It started at a half. With a first cousin, you got it up to 9/16. But now when the first cousin is the parent, and then you got another first cousin, it's 9/16 of that. And within 5 or 6 generations, you're related to your daughter by over 90%. So I just, hypothetically, this is a few nights ago, just gave you possible values of the way in which repeated first cousins are going to drive degrees of relatedness up. Yes, you're almost identically related to your daughter. However, you're related to your nephew and your niece now by almost 95%. You're related to your cousin by almost 90%. So what it does is it raises the relative value of your other relatives compared to your own daughter. Under complete outbreeding, I'm related to my child by a half. I'm related to my grandchild by a quarter. I'm related to nephews and nieces by a quarter. I'm related to cousins by 1/8. Everything is half, half, half whenever you add an extra mating in there. But under inbreeding, no. You instead have this tendency for everything to head up towards 1, with the result that, let's assume the child has done something that harms the reputation of the family or harms other relatives directly or indirectly. Under this system, the harm is relatively larger compared to the benefit that you're seeing to her, or whatever that is. She decides to mate with someone different. There's a benefit to her, but there's a cost into the reputation of these other individuals. The point is that first cousin marriages are, by necessity, increasing the relative value of relatives other than your own child compared to the child. Now, let me just contrast Muslim versus Hindu honor killings. Muslim is what we've been talking about. Repeated first cousin marriages. Killers are close relatives, and it occurs in immigrant countries. That is, when a Muslim migrates to Dallas, Texas, or migrates to Arizona, or migrates to Bradford in the UK, the family's still all there. So the father and the uncle and the others are available to keep the honor killing going. Not so with Hindus. Hindus have a long history of endogamous castes. That is, they've recently done the genetics, and they've shown that different castes, from Brahmins all the way down to untouchables, they have been endogamous, that is, breeding within themselves now, for at least 3,000 years. That's 100 generations if a generation is 30 years, and a generation is usually less than 30 years, so it's even more than 100 generations, okay? Now, in small rural villages, you may have 5 or 6 of these castes that are having to live together and split up work and so on, but they're all endogamous. They are not breeding across sideways to each other. They are breeding within their caste. Now, Hindus often have a rule that you are to try to avoid subcaste marriages. So that's a rule against really close inbreeding. But as I say, on the other hand, they specifically permit uncle-niece marriages. And nobody has yet measured the extent to which degrees of relatedness in the immediate family are going up because of this endogamy. Indeed, this recent paper, unfortunately, for certain methodological reasons, it excluded data that would allow you to analyze exactly that. It just analyzed the degree to which you're endogamous. Now, in Hindu society, so it seems the function is not so much to protect the honor of your family, but to protect the honor of your caste, and your family is located solidly within your caste. The killers are not your family. It's not your father and your uncle. It's the village council, especially the chief of the village council. These are old men who have political power over the castes that they rule. They're the council that rules the caste, and the head of the council is especially powerful. They're the ones that designate, Baloch, you gotta go, or so-and-so, you're gonna be re-raped. They have some extremely ugly scenes. A woman is raped once, her punishment is to be raped 3 times by her brother in public. They go around in the village to room to room to room, and she's raped, and then she has her throat slit. And we believe that kind of extreme debasement may have to do with trying to frighten the hell out of a bunch of women now and into the future. So as a result, it does not occur in immigrant countries. 1 generation later, it's disappeared. You do not find Hindu honor killings in England. You do not find Hindu honor killings in the US. They've got to be in the Hindu villages, okay, themselves. So here's just a picture of where honor killings are reported, and this just shows you yellow are countries where these are all Muslim honor killings because they're outside of the area where the Muslims come from, but they bring it with them. Hindus, no. Hindus are right over here in southern Asia and so on. So victim's home country is in red there. Russia, on some maps, is white, but if you're talking about the lower border of it, as you know, you have countries, Uzbekistan or whatever, that are mostly or partly Muslim. And so they practice this honor killings. Now, I want to switch to emphasize it. It's not just Muslims and Hindus. Damn, that ain't too good, is it? I thought it was better. Well, anyway, it's none too good. This is a very sad picture. This is Duterte, who's a pig, a swine. And he has, for the honor of the Philippines, decided to kill off everybody that uses methamphetamine, everybody that sells it, and then he tosses in a third of completely innocent people while he's at it. This is heartbreaking if you just saw a good version of it. This is his daughter crying, looking over to her cousin. This is his wife crying. And when you look at the picture, you say to yourself, does he look like he was a bad father? Does he look like he was mistreating these girls? Does he look like he was a burden to his wife? No, he doesn't. But he's murdered by Duterte, who has the gall to call President Obama son of a whore. So I'll call Duterte, say he has no mother. He's a piece of shit who came out of his father's asshole, if you want to hear something really vulgar. And Duterte, I could not say this in your country. You'd have me killed within a day or two. But if you want to send 20 men to Jamaica to do me in, God bless you. We're waiting for you. All right, enough for that fool. Now here's something bizarre out of Ireland, and it has a even more bizarre roots in England. My God, what are these? These are orphans that are left in a Catholic home in Ireland because their mothers got pregnant and were not married. And that ruins them. They cannot get married again. They're ostracized. They cannot even get employment. So they are strongly urged to give up their children. Well, this child looks crazy. This one looks the most normal. This poor guy, Jesus Christ, he can't figure out what the hell is happening to him. This guy looks like he's muscling up or something. But have you heard of baby farms in England? This is Ireland from about 100 years ago or something like that. But baby farms go back 4 or 5 centuries, and it's the same problem. You're in the rural English countryside, you get pregnant, now you cannot get a job. So what do? You go to London and you see an ad saying for £10, I'll look after your baby. We have a beautiful little orphanage here. Just leave off the baby. So you find your £10, you leave off the baby, you go back to the countryside. Now you're no longer an unwed mother, so you can get a job and so on. Well, what were the baby farms? In some of them, they were just pits out back. So you got the £10 and you tossed the baby into the pit. They later, when the whole scandal kind of was allowed to be made public, they dug up pits and found 60, 70, 80 skeletons of children. In other cases, they would take the baby in and say, here's your orphanage. But they wouldn't feed him, that kind of thing. So you can have honor killings and honor tortures outside of Muslim and Hindu countries. We know that. And this is just one bizarre example. Now I want to turn for the rest to my own country and to something hideous called lynchings. And that's where you hung black men by the neck. It did not exist in slavery times because your slave was valuable to you. If the slave was annoying to you enough, you might sell him to a slave trader who would then sell him to Jamaica at a loss. But you wouldn't kill him because he's worth $2,000. However, when slavery ended, no, the black man ain't worth nothing to you, and he's a threat to you because some of your women find him more attractive than they find you. So to protect the honor, as they put it, of Southern white women, they used to hang black men who were accused or suspected of having relations with a white woman. 4,000 such lynchings took place. They were grotesque public spectacles. I can't even look at the pictures of 35 half-crazed white people dancing around underneath a tree where two tall, strong, strapping-looking black men are hanging by the neck. However, those public ones disappeared in 1965, big public displays. What people in the U.S. do not know is that the lynchings have continued to this blessed day, only they're done at night in private and made to look like suicide. So I'm just going to take you through one case which is particularly well analyzed, in part because I've gotten involved in the damn case. Now, this is the mother of the victim, about 2 months after her favorite last son was lynched. She looks like death warmed over, but if you look at her, and you'll see her looking a lot better later on, she's completely symmetrical in her face and so on, but she's suffering terribly from the fact that Lenin, at age 17, was lynched. That's a picture of him when he's about 15. He was known as Big Little Son because he was the last child and the largest of her children. You can see her second oldest son has got his hand on his mother there. Now, let's tell the story of Lenin. Okay, here's Lenin as an adult. Here he's a military cadet in high school. That means he's planning to join the military on a volunteer basis. Very American thing to do. Here he's in a football uniform, and he's an excellent linebacker. And any black American youth with athletic prowess, especially in football, hopes to use that to get into college, a football scholarship. And then if he's exceptional in college, well, then he hopes to get in the National Football League and be able to buy his mother a house. Now, the next morning after he was lynched was supposed to be his first game. Why? He was a star on the team, high school team, but he was not allowed to play against other high schools because his grades were just a little bit below the cutoff line. So he works extra hard to get his grades up there, and now this following day is his first game against another high school. He's very excited. He lays his football uniform out so as to be ready the next morning. In other words, he's not suicidal in the slightest. There's no suicidal mentation. There's no reason to suspect suicide. What's his problem? He's 17. His problem is that he's having a relation with a 31-year-old woman. Now, she was a drug user. Some claimed a drug addict. She said, I'm not a drug addict, I'm a drug user. But every drug addict says they're a drug user. So who knows? I'm not saying she was an addict, but she was a user. Did she rent out her pum-pum to help pay for her drugs? Well, if she did, she wouldn't be the first woman in the U.S. that did that. But it's not known, although there's talk. In any case, she is warned a couple of weeks before Lenin is murdered that she's to avoid an Nigger, because we don't tolerate that in Bladenboro, North Carolina, which the black people call Cracker Town. Cracker is a derogatory term for white people of the racist kind. And Lenin had also been warned by a friend of his, white friend of his, watch it, there are people that have their eyes on you, right? Here's where he's lynched, right over there. Now, this is a children's swing set. This is a poor white community, And at 7.5 feet up there, he's 5'9". There's no way he can jump up there. There's no way he can get up here and get over there. He has to get up here and somehow move his black behind all the way over there, tie a belt and another strap around his neck, and commit suicide. Well, it's improbable on its face. It also violates a rule regarding suicide. You don't tend to commit suicide in a hostile community. You either commit suicide close to home or in the woods that are close to home. You take a private area and you go hang yourself. But you don't do it in a racist park where black people were explicitly told, we don't want to see you after dark. 50 feet away from where he lives this pleasant-looking organism, Dewey Sykes. He's not the wealthiest cracker in Cracker Town, as you can see, and he's looking out here. He lives 50 feet from where Lennon's body was found, and he used to have hanging in his front yard a big sign that says Niggers, keep out, until the city made him take it down. But he also had a Confederate flag. That's the flag of the states that broke from the United States, causing the Civil War, because they wanted to keep slavery going. He was cousin of ex-cop Randy Sykes, and Randy Sykes, I've learned, used to harass black people, especially by stopping them at random and just studying them. What do you got in your car? What are you doing? Where are you today? That kind of stuff. So almost certainly a racist duo. Now, this is Lennon, picture taken shortly before he was murdered. He's a solid guy. He's 220 pounds. It would have taken about 5 men to beat him into submission. You couldn't do it with 2 men his age or size. You could not pull it off. Notice the sneakers he has. They're brand new, they're colorful, they're stylish, they're Nike $130 sneakers. All right. This is what's found on his body the next day when it's cut down. These are 2 sizes too small. They aren't the stylish ones. They lack shoelaces. They're dirty. They've been cleaned up a bit. Although you can still see on the top there is not the cleanest damn pair of sneakers you saw. So again, from the family standpoint, what the hell is going on here? Now comes the most telling piece of evidence there is. Abrasions and injuries. And I will quote from the coroner, and I will quote from Claudia Lacey, which is Lennon's mother. The coroner reported multiple abrasions. An abrasion is an injury such as you would get if I struck you hard in the face. Then you might get an abrasion underneath. It would be red and dark in color. And you might also get some of your skin abraded, okay? So multiple abrasions on the face, upper chest, arms, and testicles, scrotum. Lacey, who was shown the body 2 hours after it was cut down because they wanted her to identify it, noted these same abrasions plus an eye contusion. Right above one eye was a big welt coming out like so, and a broken septum right across the nose right here. And she also noted multiple knuckle injuries. She couldn't tell whether her son's fingers had been broken, but they had been repeatedly slammed against something. Now, this is taken by decent coroners as prima facie evidence that it is not suicide, it is murder. because nobody but nobody beats himself up first and then says, you know, hell, I can't take it anymore. I think I'll hang myself. No. You go hang yourself. You do not cause abrasions. If, by contrast, you find abrasions on the person, suicide is not your first hypothesis, murder is, and you only start considering suicide when you've eliminated murder. But these people do it exactly the other way around. They have evidence that it was murder, but they quickly sweep that under the rug and make it out to be suicide. Now, how do they sweep that under the rug? This is the world's expert on ant bites. I've studied ants for a couple of years down in Panama, and I wrote my friend who's the world's expert on ants, period, and he was in Germany, and he said, Bob, I'm in Germany. Write Justin Schmidt at University of Arizona, because he's the world's authority on ant bites. So he writes back and says, this is amazingly remarkable that anybody would even postulate such an idea. What's the idea? The idea is that ant bites cause the abrasions. He says, going on, Justin Schmidt, it was a lynching, no doubt about it. If it were not considered a lynching, it would certainly be murder, not suicide. First of all, ants are incapable of biting our skin. What people call ant bites are in fact ant stings. I've been stung repeatedly in Panama studying ants, and also there's a particular stinging ant in Jamaica where if you make a mistake and sit down on their nest, you better take off running because they'll be stinging all through here. Now, the stings do not result in abrasions. They result in tiny, tiny, if any injury at all, red little pricks. So there's no way in which ant bites could explain it. The coroner says that there were ants, red ants, crawling on the body. Well, if so, that had to result from the fact that he was cut down and his body was allowed to lie on the ground for a couple of hours before they took him off to the coroner. Because none of the 3 species of ants in the area climbs. They don't even climb part way up that structure you saw right there. They are strictly on the ground. So I'm leaving out, the more detailed report of this guy, but it's devastating. This is a lie. Now, the Claudia Lacey and some of the people that supported her got the North Carolina state to investigate it. They signed off, yes, it's suicide. Then they called in the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Sometimes we have respect for the FBI, and a lot of times if we know how they operate, we don't. They will come into a case like this, and all they do is make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed. They do not make a serious analysis of the evidence. Because how in Jesus' name could the FBI be so stupid as to think that you could get abrasions all over your body, here and here and here and here, and all of this comes from ant bites. Plus, when Claudia says to them, what about the contusion? They say, oh, that happened while they were embalming the body. They slipped up or something and they caused a contusion. Well, first of all, when a body is dead, and it's been dead for some time, it does not react at all to what you're doing. It does not produce a contusion, period. Secondly, she had seen the contusion before the FBI came along and saw it, and afterwards as well. And therefore, she knows that this could not have been the result of embalming. So what you have here is a double crime. You have the murder of an innocent young man for no reason whatsoever except that he's dating a white woman. And then you have the authorities come in and concoct a series of lies so as to hide the murder. Okay? We're getting close to the end. Now, here's Claudia now, and thank God she's looking a hell of a lot better. She's a beautiful woman, actually, and she's very articulate. She's strong, and she wants justice for her son. I've met her now in person. I've been to Bladenboro once, but that is a racist hellhole, and I am not going back there unless I am armed, period. This is North Carolina in the U.S. She's being interviewed here on a show. So anyway, let me just mention 2 other lynchings, because it turns out that lynchings are occurring at least once a year in the U.S. In fact, Claudia was saying it's more than once a year, and I think she's right. So let me just give you 2 examples. This guy here he's something like 61 years old, and here he is again. And his problem is, this is in New York, for God's sake. This is not down south. A friend of his reported that there had been tensions in the community because of Parrott's friendships with white women, and that the letters KKK had been carved into a tree in his yard. KKK is Ku Klux Klan, and they were out in force in Virginia in response to that idiot that is now President of the United States and who's encouraging them. He's a long-time anti-black racist, and he's encouraging these people. In any case, it's the KKK that has gone underground until they came out in Charlottesville. This guy goes missing. For 14 months they search for him and they can't find him. Then one day they look up this tree, and there he is. He's been taken down, but he's way the hell up here. He's over 30 feet up the tree. Now me, if I'm committing suicide, trust me, I'm not climbing higher than 8 feet, and then I'll hang myself. I'm afraid of heights. Why in Jesus' name would he do an athletic feat as an overweight man of climbing 30 feet up in order to kill himself? It doesn't seem likely. All right, what about this guy? That's his high school graduation photo. Looks like a happy, handsome guy. That's his sister, that's his mother. But alas, again, he has a fast car, and he's been known to date white girls. And this is in Maryland. Again, that's not the Deep South. And he's found hanging, and his family is trying to, 8 years later, still trying to get the damn thing investigated. They ain't got much chance. Most of these lynchings are just disappearing. It's too late, and they ain't got the evidence. Now, back in Bladenboro, they did manage to, the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, did manage to stage a march there with hundreds of people. And as you can see, both fair-skinned and dark-skinned, white, black, and so on, justice for Lennon Lacy. I want to see justice for Lennon Lacy, and I do have a thought or 2 on how to make it more likely it'll happen. Here's one case where a boy is going to get justice, but we sure had to wait a long time. Again, this is down in Georgia, and he was known to have white girlfriends. He was just a youth at the time, as you can see. Killed in 1983. Well, 93, 103, that's 34 years ago. They finally arrest 2 of the guys that lynched him, okay? And the reason they did, they opened what's called a cold case file in the U.S., where they specifically say, hey, this is an unsolved murder. You are now going to spend the next year, doing everything you can to find out what actually happened, is there any new evidence, and so on. And what they found was that these guys were bragging to people that they had done the murder. And so there were 3 other people that were arrested who were hiding what they were bragging. I've left them out of the photo just to give you a look at 2 guys that we feel pretty certain actually lynched this guy. So the family had to wait 34 years, but at least that's better than waiting forever. And I don't think anybody down in Bladenboro is going to talk. And if they talk, I don't think anybody's going to repeat it. There is a way to fight them, though. So let me end this section by just going back to little old Lennon. Last child, largest of her children, 8 pounds and so many ounces. He was also a very loving child. He would rub his mother's legs when she came home at work in the evening, tired from a stand-up job and so on. And he would also wash her feet when she wanted her feet washed and so on. So he's a very loving child to her mother, to his mother, and he was prized by the other members of the family. I mean, he was the youngest child. He was also the biggest and the most athletic. Hung by his neck, beaten very badly to get him to the point where they could murder him. I asked his mother whether she would prefer that his killers were executed or that they were tried and convicted and sent to prison. And I did get a laugh out of the fact she took a while to answer, so I knew damn well she was thinking of the pleasure of executing the suckers, But she finally said the socially acceptable thing, that she wanted to see them tried, convicted, and sent to prison. I think there's still a chance, but what has to happen is that someone, and I am going to volunteer to try, has got to raise the money to hire a very aggressive attorney. She has a pro bono attorney right now. Pro bono means they're doing it for free, but then typically they don't do a hell of a lot. They're weak. And she ought to get an attorney that sues the state of North Carolina for $17 million or something like that. And while you're at it, go ahead and sue the FBI. To hell with the FBI. They're incompetent covering up of a crime like this. Now, this is not in hopes that she's going to get the $17 million. It's to wake North Carolina up, and it's to get in the newspapers, and it's to force them to reopen the case, because the statute of limitations on murder never runs out. Rape, if 6 years have gone by, I've gone free, okay? But murder, no. You can always reopen the case, as just happened with that case that was 34 years old. So to summarize, I've been dealing with a very ugly phenomenon involving murder with a strong bias towards close relatives doing the murdering. Then I've given some other examples just to calm us all down, realize, you want to see Catholics who are cruel? I can show you pictures. It ain't just Muslims, it ain't just Hindus. and you want to see where there's cruelty, not because you're closely related, but because you're distantly related, well, I'll lead you through the world of lynchings in the U.S. I was doing a search the other day, a Google search, to get the coroner's report, because someone wanted the name of the coroner. And I just hit in North Carolina coroner Lennon, and bingo, there were two lynching 2017 North Carolina, lynching 2016 North Carolina. Lennon was lynched in 2014. So I clicked on the 2017. That's a woman going to an all-black school in North Carolina. Well, I didn't have the time to read that case, so I can't tell you more about it. But I mentioned it to Claudia, and she said yes, she had heard of it. And I said, there's at least one lynching a year. And she said, oh, there's more than one lynching a year in the South, in the U.S. So in any case, there's no really good summary of this, except to say that I've tried to analyze what I think are the underlying genetics of some of the phenomena that I've been talking about, especially the classical honor killings, and try to show what kind of forces are at work that would lead to these extremely ugly and otherwise counterintuitive murders. And I thank you for your attention.